Hello, hello. Oh, it's actually, this is on yours, isn't it? This is on your page, Juliet. So welcome back. And wow, what an amazing day it's been. We've had a really great day, haven't we?
Yeah,
Of
lots.
sharing and coincidences and communicating. And
Yes,
it's been a
we've
bit
had
of a
messages from all over the
all over
place.
the
Yeah,
world, all
yeah.
over the world.
So it's obviously a hot topic.
Yes.
Yeah,
It is. It is. So welcome back. And so what we wanted to do was to really allow everybody to share what their, well, there's a few things. So what your experience has been today. And if you did listen to us this morning, what memories have you remembered or realised are in your body
yeah.
that need to be acknowledged and
But
given
before
support?
that, just to ground,
So we start there.
yeah, because it's really important, as I said this morning, that talking about these things are very activating, or thinking about them are activating, and your brain cannot distinguish between reality or the story that you get engaged in. So it's very easy for your primitive brain to think that you're actually in a life and death situation or in a war itself in this moment as you begin to access any memories. So just taking a moment and remembering a long out breath is really, really important for just calming down the nervous system and getting into your parasympathetic system. So feeling your bottom on the seat, wherever you're sitting, feeling your feet on the floor, and just taking a breath and a long out breath. And I just invite you at any time in the call, if you find yourself getting a little bit spacey or a little bit anxious or a little bit activated, just to take a moment to notice what it feels like sitting where you're sitting and feeling your feet on the floor. And just taking that breath just to calm your nervous system so that you can stay present to what we're talking about and what the sharing is about. So, as you were saying, Marion, we are going to share some experiences that we touched in today because we asked you to reflect on what might have happened to you in your life, or how you were touched by war, or how your friends or family were touched by war. So we're going to give you an opportunity to share that in the little box underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to respond where we can, but everybody can look and respond to each other as well. So it's very, very good to do that. And yeah, where should we start? Should I share something myself, or what's the feeling here? What's this morning, Marion talked about her experiences of being in her father going off to fight in Northern Ireland.
My grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Yeah, my
And
grandfather.
how that affected you, yes.
Yeah, I'd not even thought about it until we started this discussion, actually, because it was my mum's dad, and they lived in Ireland. They lived in Dublin, so they were in the Republic of Ireland. And so there was no need for him to go into the British Army. In fact, it was quite antagonistic to his own community, because in Southern Ireland at the time, there was a great, a lot of conflict with English people anyway. So the British Army was seen as a really negative force in the eyes of his community.
Yeah.
And so nobody knew where he went. He just left. And when he came back, they found out that he'd actually gone into the British Army and he'd served time. I don't know where he'd served time because he never spoke about it. And I was led to believe that he didn't speak about it because it was against his own community. But actually, I don't know the story if he would have shared it or not.
Yeah.
You know, because understanding how traumatic war is to men who are fighting.
Yeah.
So I've got no idea what his experience was, but also from my family's experience, my mum as a young child, she was born in 1936, so she would have been very small when this happened. And so suddenly she's lost her dad. Nobody knew where he went. And then when he arrived home, everybody thought he was an absolute fool for having gone and signed himself up to a war experience with the British Army that was totally against the community. So it's a really, really convoluted story.
Yeah.
And until we'd started to discuss this, I'd not appreciated that that is part of my history, because that was my mum's experience.
Yes.
And obviously the egg that I was born from was already thriving within my mum's body.
In the environment, in the chemical environment of all the stress that she was going through at that time. So it's not necessary in this moment for all of us to tell our stories, but just to know those places where you were touched by war, and that men get drawn into war, and women get drawn into war for many reasons, and to lift the shame from that, because men that go to war in the First World War, men were fighting to go to war because it was, oh, this is a really important thing, I have to fight for my country, and it was thought to be really heroic. And that if they didn't sign up and go, then they were shamed. And if they tried to be conscientious objectors. So there's a lot of shame by trying to say no to war. And there's a lot of shame when you come back from war, when you come back broken very often. You're totally broken and your families are broken. So there's a shame for people who've been in war with the amount of damage that's happened to them. And if they go into addiction to try and conquer the pain, then that's very shaming. So in my own life, I recall that I also had a brother that went out to Northern Ireland, and he was enticed into the army because he was told that he was going to get a better life. And the consequence of that was that he didn't, and then he came out and he committed suicide. So that was a really terrible thing that's devastated our family. My grandfather was also in the First World War in Arabia, in the cavalry, and there's consequences in my family for that. I've been, my grandmother was also a nurse in the First World War. Yeah, so all the effects of that. And my mother was a child in the bombing of the Second World War. And as Dr. Gabor Mate talks about, attachment damage. So those children that were evacuated from London at that time because of the bombing attacks suffered more damage because of the broken attachments with their families. Yeah. So that had a knock-on effect on me, on my childhood, and myself being born at the end of the war, immense poverty at that time. So there are all these other things that go alongside war, which is poverty and famine and so on. And I experienced that very much when I went to Eritrea in 1984, where there was a terrible war and famine. And the amount of children that were dying in that famine. Really, really, really terrible, terrible thing to have happened. So my life was touched in all those different ways by war. And then in the early 90s, I moved to France, and that's when I found out the village I moved to had been occupied by the Nazis. And there'd been a massacre in the little village where I'd moved. So terrible things happened there. And my barn in France was burnt down. I feel like there's an energetic link between the terrible events that happened up in Jucovielle with the Nazis and the massacre that happened there, and that left a fascist environment in the village, which then had a terrible effect on myself and my family. And then my husband, who also was trying to be a conscientious objector from the Vietnamese War, and that left him with very traumatic effects because he was shamed and attacked and pursued for trying to not be part of that war. So it's very, very difficult, and there's a lot of shame on all sides. There's a lot of damage that happens. And I think pretty much all of us are affected by war in one way or another. Yeah. So at this moment, I would like to pay homage to all those people that have suffered and died in the war in my own life. So I would really like to to acknowledge that. And I would also really pray that all that pointless, crazy death comes to an end, and that today I had a message from Dubai saying that today, on Remembrance Sunday, that children in Yemen are being bombed by Saudi planes using British weapons. So a huge split going on. So the people in the factories, the politicians, the armaments industry, were all creating the mechanisms of war. And how can this happen? And I think it happens because of the trauma, and because we actually get split from our connections of what it is that we're actually doing. So we get pushed into war for a lot of social reasons, pushed into armaments for a lot of social reasons and pressures and so on, and then split from the consequences of our actions. Yeah. And that is a result of trauma.
It's really, I think the thing that I've been looking into recently as well is that the cause of war from the perspective of who incites people to go to war. So the people who are incited to go to war, which is, I believe, is us. I call it, this is the them and us. I'm the us of the people who get told that it's their job to go to war. But by who we're told that this is necessary are people who benefit from it. And it's all, to me, it's all tied up with finance and banking and politics at a really high level that's very disjointed from the population that we are. And I mean, we saw that Russell Brand thing before, didn't we, talking to Gabor Mate? And yes. They were talking about how politicians, and they were talking about the American politicians, but how politicians themselves are very traumatized, damaged individuals that are ruling a nation from a place of serious trauma, from damage. But that split offness that you're talking about, that split from the fact that we are a human race, that we are humans, all the same humans together in one race, and yet that race is now split. And this split is what again, it was really quite enlightening to listen to Russell and Gabor Mate talking so brilliantly about how the effects of trauma in childhood go on to create the behaviours in the adult. And those adults that have got lots of trauma from childhood and are totally split off from this aspect of the race, the human race, are the people who are in charge, that are the people who tell us that it's our job to go to war to defend to defend our nation or to defend our sovereignty or to defend our rights. But actually, by telling us that that's what we have to do, they've automatically taken away our sovereignty and our human rights, because as a human race, isn't that where human rights fit in?
Yes.
It's just all so twisted.
And I think in reality, these people that are, okay, I'm saying these people, but I want to bring it back to all of us in a moment, because we're all part of these people. I want to bring together that split. But the politicians that we're talking about, I think they've already lost their sovereignty. And it's a very interesting discussion between Russell and Gabor Mate, which I've also posted on the page today. And Gabor Mate talks about the immense trauma of Donald Trump, for instance, but also the trauma of Hillary Clinton. Yes. And that many of the people in the top levels that get into politics and a lot of power and a lot of money are also people that have been sent to boarding schools or have been brought up in a very disconnected, brutal way. And that the consequence of that to the nervous system is that we split, because we either, when we experience extreme life-threatening circumstances, we either go into fight or flight. And if fight or flight doesn't work, then we go into parasympathetic shock and shutdown. So if you think about the trauma that happens to children, particularly if they're brought up in a way that's shaming and brutal, is that they will split, that they will actually detach from their body. I'm not talking about split energetically, or that, though that's the case as well, but the parasympathetic shock will take over to numb them out from the pain, the immense pain that they're going through. And I've worked with quite a few people that have gone to boarding school, and an incredible amount of grief and distress that people get into when they start touching into that feeling of what happened to them. It's very, very difficult. So we are ruled by a ruling elite very often that have had the benefits of that kind of upbringing and training. Mm. And so it's easy for them perhaps to say, oh, well, we have to go to war. They are trying to find their power in some way, and they can find their power through manipulating financially, or manipulating and playing out the experience of disempowerment and power through the movement of armies and the killing of people on the planet.
Mm. So it's just, again, it's great that we've got this opportunity to share with everybody today. So we've got, I just want to mention a few people who are actually watching and listening as we go. So we've got Rowena, hello. We've got Viola.
Hi, Riona. I'm joining the names together. Riona and Viola. Rowena and
Rowena, yeah. And Jill. Hi. And Jill, we've got Jill as well. Yeah. Hello. And I think there's other people watching too, but they haven't given us a wave. And so what we want to do is we want to invite you to share your either stories that you've got about how you can see that war has touched your life, and that the trauma, the resulting trauma from that has created, I mean, it's things that are really very unconscious to us, isn't it? What get created. So, I mean, for me, the disconnection from dad is something that's always been there. And my own dad was quite a violent alcoholic, so I didn't want to connect to him anyway. Mm. But knowing that my mum had this forced separation from her own dad, and then I had a separation that was, to me, it felt it was enforced by the situation, by the personality that my dad had developed. But his own background was with lots of violence, and we believe, but we've never proved it, that my dad's dad was in the First World War and had been fighting in the First World War. So there was some massive trauma. Yeah. And he was a really very violent man, and he was famous for being a bare knuckle boxer. So he got great pride in being this super, super violent person. But then obviously as the granddaughter of his son, or the daughter of his son, violence being seen as something to be proud of was a big shock to me in my life, and it shut me down as a child. So I've got the separation from my dad, and my mum had a separation from her dad. So I can see all these like common themes that have happened, and coincidence or not, it's like we've all had these similar experiences. So I know that a lot of my personality and my behaviours have developed from having had that situation be my reality, be happening to me throughout my life, through all of my life, really.
Yeah, and we have to remember that our animal nervous system, our reptilian brain that keeps us safe, has the capacity when we're in danger to make us immensely powerful. So if we get triggered into fight or flight, we have incredible power in our limbs. We have incredible capacity to...
You hear about mums lifting up cars, don't you, to get the child out from underneath it and things,
So if you think that those people that were in the war or were affected by war, that they've now got this imprint of fight or flight in their nervous system, and then they get triggered very easily. Peter Levine talks about a car backfiring and a PTSD, thank you. Somebody suffering from PTSD who's a war veteran hears that backfiring and immediately is taken back thinking that they're being attacked, while somebody who's not traumatized will know that it's a car backfiring. So the war veteran in that moment goes into a full-on reaction and is trying to protect himself or protecting someone else, and can become very violent in that moment. And
it happens in dreams as well, doesn't it? Yeah. Some PTSD sufferers have episodes where they wake up strangling their wife or doing really violent acts from sleep because they've been triggered in their dreams as well. You said yesterday about Bessel van der Kolk, and he was talking about the cost to society
the cost to society of war, it's huge, because when people come back from the war, then the amount of damage that's happened in their family, the alcoholism or the drug addiction, the fact that that person that was broken in the war is unable to work, the resulting damage on the family, on the children, on the wife, the partner, the splitting up on that, the splitting up of the family, the cost of social services, if it's in a country with social services. I mean, the cost is immense, but that's never looked at in terms of going to war, because the people who are driving the war machine are looking for the profits, amongst other things, of the war mechanism, the bombs. Yeah, the bombs, the planes, the guns. Our military budget is always much greater than our social security budgets. So it's very much a business enterprise. But just going back to this thing about violence, how people, when they have been in a war situation, can be so easily triggered into violence, or people who are the children of people who've been to war can become very easily violent. And I also remember from my childhood a huge amount of violence happening as a result of, just post-war. It's like that's all that fear and terror is still very pervasive in our lives, and very much everybody very much on the edge of what could happen next. Yeah, and it's also from a family's perspective as well. I can imagine if your dad or your husband or somebody's gone off to war and you're waiting for them to come home, you're expecting the same person to come back that left. Yeah,
and any of the scars that they've got, any of the traumas that they've had, means that person comes back with a totally different personality. Yeah, it's like a stranger would be coming back into your home.
So it's a huge loss. And as I said before, human beings need to be connected. We really need to have that safe, secure connection with our carers and our partners and so on. And if somebody comes back and they're different, you have had a connection broken that is very profoundly traumatizing as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So if at any point, if you're watching this and you're watching the recording, and at any point anything that we touch on feels that it's important for you, and you're not sure what to do, then we appreciate that you can send us private messages too. So this video is going to be on Juliet's page, but I'm going to share it on my page as well. And just really do feel that you're welcome to connect to us if you've got any kind of need, because one of the things that we'd like to be able to do is to share how to support each other with helping to heal this cycle of trauma. The information that we're sharing today isn't to just regurgitate the trauma as it was, but it's actually to see that even though this has happened in the past, and these are currently the situations that we know that have arisen and have emerged from this past, that there is a way forward that's a healing process, that we can use the tools and the skills that Juliet is teaching and that I'm learning from Juliet. I'm very fortunate that she's my lovely teacher. And so the skills that we're sharing are things that some of them are actually quite simple to do, but will have a really powerful effect on you. And if you did watch us this morning, you'll maybe remember where we spoke about when you start to work on your own pain and your own trauma and your own healing from the pain and the trauma. When you begin to do that work on yourself and change your own nervous system, that will automatically impact everybody and everything around you. And one of the things that I always say is when I started my own profound deep work, it was like everybody around me had a personality transplant, because I didn't recognize the change in me as quickly and easily as I recognized the change in others. And I know now that that's this ripple effect that happens. So the more I bring myself to a healed place, the more that those healed ripples spread out and impact and affect everybody and everything around me. So it's really important that this work gets out there, because it is so needed. We are so unconscious of so much of our wounding. And yet when we can become conscious of it, we don't have to be re-traumatized by it. but we just need to be aware of what it is so that we can bring the healing up. And as I say, that will impact everybody.
Yeah. So by unconscious, again, that's not a judgment. It's the becoming unconscious is a mechanism of the reptilian brain to protect us when we're in extreme danger. We split off, we disconnect from the pain, and hence we become unconscious. And it's for this reason that many people believe they have no trauma, because they are disconnected. So I want to really clarify that trauma is not the thing that happened. It's not the war that happened, but it is, the war is traumatizing. But trauma is what is happening to us now in this present moment in our nervous systems. And healing, because we can't change the war, we can't change the fact that happened, and or the fact we were abandoned by our families or any of those things. We can't change it. It's done. But what we can change right now, right here and now, is our nervous system, the way our nervous system is coping and the way it's responding. And a healed nervous system, for that war veteran, a healed nervous system is the fact that he or she doesn't jump and immediately think they're in extreme danger when a car backfires. They come back to that place of normality and knowing that's a car backfiring and I'm not under attack anymore. So the triggers have been removed from their nervous system, and the nervous system is functioning in a normal, normal smooth curve now of arousal and settling, and not going into extreme activation or fight or flight or parasympathetic shock. So in this moment, if you find yourself activated, it means that you are also traumatized. If you're beginning to feel anxious from what we're talking about, or depressed or overwhelmed, just take time to tune back into your body and to breathe, long out breaths, feeling your bum on the seat. So perhaps we should all do that.
Do a breath together, because it helps us when people see us.
Yeah, let's just do that for a moment. Let's calm down, because there's been a lot talked about. Yeah. So feeling your bottom on the seat. Just noticing how that feels, noticing how your weight is distributed. Feeling your feet on the floor. Notice what you can feel under your feet. And taking a breath, and a long out breath. And as you do that, just allowing your body to be heavier, allowing your body to settle. And just doing that again, taking a breath. And a long out breath. And just noticing where in your body in this moment you're comfortable. Where do you have a sensation of wellness and comfort in this moment? And just tuning into that, feeling that, even if it's only a tiny place, just making that the center of your attention, that feeling of comfort. So Dr. Peter Levine, who was the pioneer that discovered the effects of trauma in the brain, and did his pioneering work with war veterans, and he established something called Somatic Experiencing. He talks about building little islands of safety in the body, that this sensory awareness is really pivotal in healing our trauma, healing our brains. So it's really crucial that you learn to tune in to those places in your body where you feel comfortable. And just when you notice yourself get a little bit stressed or agitated, just coming back to that place of comfort and settling into it again. And this is what begins to heal the trauma. This is what begins to bring your brain up to date, that you're not in a life and death situation, but you're here, right here and now. And we're talking about war and trauma, but right in this moment, we're not in a war and we're not in trauma, right in this moment. And although we know that in this moment there are some terrible things happening in the world, like those poor children right now in Yemen, just right here and in this moment, you are not part of that, even though it might really affect, I mean, it really hurts my heart to think about it. But I know that actually myself in this moment, I'm well. So just bringing your attention back to that feeling of wellness in the body. Because if we're going to heal this, we really need to begin to address it within our own bodies and healing ourselves in this moment. So we have a big, big task on our hands, and we need to be as well as possible.
Yeah. It's about being the change that you want to see, isn't it? If we can act the way that we want other people to act and be models and to be, as you say, like these islands of safety that we can find in our body. If we can become islands of safety for the community or the groups that we're a part of as well,
yes,
that really gives something. It's an anchoring point to help people to realise that as much as we see that there's doom and gloom and devastation everywhere, actually in this, in this present moment right now, we're comfortable, we're warm, we're in a cool place, it's nice, it's safe, and there's a lot of love here for us. So to be able to focus on that is really, really important.
Yes, absolutely. And this feeling of being right here, right now, and being safe and well, and being islands of safety, and that how we can change other people by making that our reality. It's also something that happens in the nervous system. So when you calm your own nervous system, other people around you will also get calmed. So human beings make this connection the whole time. We're really reliant on eye contact and the subtle signals that we give through our facial expressions and body postures and so on. So the role of a parent with a very small baby is to help that baby develop a calm nervous system, and that will happen through the cues from the facial expressions and the eyes and the eye contact. So the more that you can heal your own nervous system, then your facial expressions and your eye contact will be much more congruent, and that in itself will start creating you as an island of safety to be able to help other people. So it's not something that you have to try and do to heal other people. It's the more healed you are yourself, the more congruence and the safer your contact is to other people. So when they're there in your company, they can just settle. They can just...
Yeah, and it happens automatically, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just happens automatically.
You don't have to try.
Yeah.
So I can see that Jill has shared a story about her own family and how sad she became this morning, because obviously touching on that trauma within the family and seeing the celebration of today, or the commiseration, or whatever we want to call it, that the Remembrance Day means lots of different things to different people. But when we are affected by these, especially when it's done in a community, that whole thing about somebody's nervous system impacting mine, when everybody's feeling sad, or everybody's feeling angry, or everybody's feeling a certain feeling that's brought on by the media, or a date that everybody's remembering for the same reasons, then it's going to be, it's like it's automatically going to impact me. That energy is around me everywhere. I'm swimming in a soup of that energy, aren't I?
Yeah.
So even more important for us to be able to bring ourselves back to our own sense of who I am, where my center is, where my peace is, where my safety is, because those ripples around me are so disturbed that to enable me to bring myself back is a really massive tool. One of the things that I do want to share here as well is there's a word that we use, Juliet, on your course, and it's called resourcing. So I'm just going to put the question up on the screen. It's how do you resource yourself? So, for example, Jill, you've given us a really strong, powerful story about what happened to you today, and it's there for people to read in the comments when they watch this. But what have you done, Jill, today to help yourself to recover from the effects that sadness brought with you this morning? Because I mean, I'll let you talk about it more, Juliet, but resourcing is one of the first things that I learned from Juliet, the word itself. I knew what it meant. I worked in IT for many years. I've done project planning, done lots of resourcing from a project perspective. But when it comes to our own personal experience, it's absolutely crucial, isn't it?
Absolutely. And resourcing is really a physical thing that we do. And the aim of resourcing is to give a different set of information back to the reptilian brain. So when we're activated, the brain in that moment believes it is that your body, that you are in a serious life and death situation. And that in that activation, the fact that your heartbeat has gone up, the fact that your respiration has increased, and there's a lot of muscle tension, is also giving a feedback to the reptilian brain to tell it that we are in danger. So there are both external signals and internal signals that's causing you to become more and more wound up and more activated. So you have to break the cycle. So when you notice that you're activated, you notice that you're distressed, breaking the cycle is by giving a different set of sensory information to the reptilian brain. So everybody's means of resourcing are different, but there are certain things that we have in common, like taking a walk in nature, perhaps having something nice to eat, or sharing some nice time with friends, things that begin to give you an immediate sense of well-being and comfort in the body. So if you have been distressed today, then what have you done to resource yourself? What is it that you can do when you go away from this call? What can you do to help yourself now feel better, that gives you a really strong sensory feeling of wellness and well-being? And it may be that if you are somebody suffering from a lot of trauma, that things have become very limited and it's not easy to access a resourced feeling. So, but the number one step in healing trauma is to begin to build a sense of resource in your body. So I would encourage you to begin to think about, what is it that I can do that will help me feel better?
And even just the breathing that we did.
Yes.
To take us just one slow, conscious breath and feeling the weight of the body. Sometimes that in itself can make a huge difference.
Yes, it can make a huge difference. And just to say, there's no right or wrong, because all of our trauma patterns are different. And for some people, according to what's happened, then the breath work may be very difficult for you. But there will be something, if you begin to look and explore, there will be something that starts to build this feeling of wellness in the body. And the more that you actually do that, the greater the healing and the improvement in the nervous system. So trauma is a physical problem, and it's healed through the body, through positive sensory awareness. So what can you do today to resource? What are your resources?
It's so easy to become disconnected from the body as well, isn't it? We're taught to think. I remember when, like as a child, if I'd trip, my mum would tell me to watch where you're going. And so it wasn't a case of feeling. Like if she'd said, feel your feet on the ground, I think that would be a better instruction to stop me from tripping over my own feet, would be to feel my feet.
Yeah.
Whereas to watch the ground is actually quite a stressful thing, because then you've disconnected from everything that was pleasant around you, or I can't see my mum, or so the way that we are informed and instructed, and even the names that are given to things like head boy, the head teacher, the head of a department, it's all about the head and thinking and mind. And we are, just even in our language, we're disconnected from the feeling senses within the physical body.
But I think that's an example of that we have a traumatized planet. And that very often when there is extreme trauma, there will be a split, a mind-body split. And that it's very easy to go into the mind. That's where we go to very quickly if we're activated or agitated. So it means that we have people that are very who get very rational, very intellectual, and disregard what's happening in the body. And we also can have people that are very spiritual and very disconnected in that way. It's another way of actually being split and protecting oneself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spiritual bypass.
Spiritual bypass.
So we bypass the body.
But it's important not to shame and blame either yourself or each other, because I firmly believe that every single individual has done the best that they can, given the amount of suffering that they have been through. And for some of us, it's very easy to judge other people, particularly if they've become addicted to alcohol or substances. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this a lot and says it's not why the addiction, but why the pain. What is the pain? What is the pain that's caused us to have to take steps to numb ourselves out to that degree?
Yeah, I think it's a huge part of my own journey is not to blame, especially my parents, because I did for many years blame them for being bad parents and doing the wrong thing. And it is so easy to judge. And I think the more I felt that I was judged, the more I wanted to throw that back on the world. So I ended up doing what I didn't like having done to me. I just became a perpetrator of what I felt I was a victim to. Yes. And I think that's another cycle, isn't it, that can happen really easily when we've got this really narrow band of how we express ourselves because of the
trauma, because as we get traumatized, the different parts of the brain disconnect. And so we have a very narrow interpretation, and given that we're often triggered into fight or flight or parasympathetic shock. So this is how we can get into the blame and the shame cycles. Just so seeing that blame and shame are symptoms of trauma.
And then not blaming yourself and not feeling bad for being, because I went through all of that as well. Oh, I'm so bad. I've been blaming everybody and it's not really their fault.
Yeah,
exactly. But it's not even my fault.
It's not even
It's nobody's fault. No. It's just the way things are, and looking for the solutions, which is how I came to work with you, is how can we find the solutions that change this? So rather than keep looking at the problem and getting upset about the problem and worrying about the problem, how can we look for the solution? What is the solution, and what's the best thing for us to do to move in that direction?
Absolutely, which is how I came to be doing this work myself, because many terrible things happened in my life, and I was in quite a state. And I remember when my brother committed suicide, how angry I was about that, and how much I blamed other people in my family as a result of that, and then felt bad about it. And it's as I did my own healing that I then began to be easier on them and easier on myself, but also feeling bad that I had blamed.
Yeah, it's very easy to get caught in these cycles. So what can people do? So one of the next things I want to do is to just ask, do you have any questions? Because I've got this brilliant teacher here, Juliet, and I've got lots of experience as well of my own and with clients that I've worked with, and I'm always expanding my awareness and my knowledge, and working in trauma has helped me to see so much more clearly how to not necessarily answer people's questions, but usually it's to help people to see that the question in itself has a need of healing, if you like. We ask questions from a very unhealed place, and if we could bring healing to that place, then the question will automatically change. And in a way, often, I think it's Einstein says, doesn't he, you can't find a solution when you're in the same mentality or the same
that created the solution,
the problem. Yeah. So the solution never comes from the same level of consciousness as the problem, but the solution also always lives inside the problem. At the same time, you just have to shift your perspective to see that the solution is there. So if any of you have got any questions, we'd really like to have your questions so that you can share in our wisdom and help us to expand how we share the message that we have as well. I'm going to see if this works. This is look at that. I'm so proud of myself.
You did very well. I hope you appreciate this lovely lady here. She's done so much work today to be able to help us all. Yeah.
That's good questions. Look, it's moving. I love it. You can ask me how I did that. It's one of the questions you can ask.
So how did you do that?
It's on a thing called Be Live, is the software.
Okay.
And when you go on to Be Live, you have a thing called an agenda, which pops up things on the screen. And these are called, the agenda's got two things. One of them is, let me see, I'll tell you the name of it now. One is called titles, which stay still, and the other is called a crawler. So this is a crawler.
Ah, nice.
We've got Mina Fannis. Do you know Mina Fannis? Hello, Mina.
Hi, Mina.
Just sent us a loving gaze.
Oh.
So
Love back to
Yvonne Haling, who's watching, wants to know how we did it. Yeah, so you need to log into a thing called Be Live, and when you go to Be Live, you set up the broadcast, set up an agenda, and then you add items to the agenda, and one of the items is called a crawler. And so you can see our crawler. Thank you, Yvonne. Who else is saying I'm brilliant? I'm just going to absorb some of these lovely feelings here. So Jill, thank you for saying I'm brilliant. And who else? Viola. Viola's saying thank you so much for such amazing sharing. So let's put Viola's message up there. And you can see a nice picture of Viola as well. It's great, this, isn't it? So there's Viola's message. Thank you, Viola, for watching and taking part in this. Kathy Lotus Petal Whitefield. What a great name.
Ah, amazing.
That's a great name.
Oh, lots of love to you. Hope you're well.
So if you've got any questions about what we've been talking about, or any questions about what's been your experience of today? So what's this? Do we need people who are frightened of peeling the onion, uncovering the trauma? Do you meet people who are frightened? So do you meet people who are frightened of delving into trauma?
I think people are always frightened. If they're traumatized, then fear comes as part of that. But what's important to know, if you are going to do trauma healing, particularly if you come to somebody who's experiencing trauma healing, then it's not about delving into the story. My primary focus when I work with people is helping them to resource. So we might have a cup of tea together, we might have a chat about something nice that's happened that day. And all the time I'm just titrating and just working on a little tiny piece at a time to gradually build their resilience and their capacity to be with what may be a difficult feeling in the nervous system in that moment. So Dr. Peter Levine talks about titration and pendulation in building safety. So you cannot heal trauma unless you, first of all, create a feeling of safety and well-being for the person you're working with. So the answer is yes, people are usually frightened, and that after working for half an hour, then that fear begins to go away and they're feeling much better. And in my experience, people usually at the end of a session go away feeling considerably better than when they started.
And so Jill's saying it's not about knowing what the trauma is, but building the resources.
Building the resources, yes. It's not that we all know what the trauma is, and the trauma is that you might fly off the handle at any moment, or easily get frightened, or wake up in panic attacks in the night, or be frightened of going out of your front door. That's the trauma. It's not important to know what the cause of that was. We don't have to go back to the cause. We don't have to know anything about the cause, because the trauma is right here, right now, is presenting itself in your body in this moment, in your body movements, in your gestures, your hands, the way your nervous system is functioning, the way your memory functions, the way your thinking processes are, the way your mood swings. That is the trauma. The trauma isn't the war. It isn't the marital breakup. It isn't the rape or the abuse. They were factors that could have caused you to be traumatized. It's not necessary to go back to that in order to heal it.
And that's a problem often with psychotherapy or counselling or even coaching sometimes, isn't it? That people have this perception that we need to revisit the causing situation or the traumatizing situation in order to get back into the energy to clear it. But that's not true, because as Juliet said, if we can connect into the body right now, the body has a memory right now in this moment that will be expressed in a behavior or a thinking process or an idea or an action. And it's through that right now way of the nervous system responding or reacting that's all we need to access, the behavior that's here now. And once you've found that, and then you find the resource, I love that the pendulation and the titration is a great thing to do, because what you're doing is the pendulation is the swinging like a clock pendulum. So it's like touch where the pain or the trauma might be, but then knowing that you've built this really lovely pathway back to comfort and safety. And so whenever the swinging happens, it's always done with this knowledge that you're going to be able to get back to comfort and safety and a resourced place. So then it means that the swinging isn't quite so violent or so scary or so terrifying, because you always know that this pathway back is possible, and you're building to make it easier and quicker and much more accessible for you to come back to this place of comfort.
Yeah.
So the thing that caused all of this trauma at the beginning, the traumatizing situation, we don't need to go there, because we've got access to what's stored in the cells, in the memory of the body, and accessible through the reptilian brain, which they're not even connected to the mind and the memories in a way that's healable, really, aren't they? I love it when people talk about the bottom up and top down healing, and sort of meeting in the middle and having a healed sandwich. So do you want to share a little bit about bottom up and top down as well?
Well, bottom up healing is really working through the body, working through the sensory awareness, working in a method which is called Somatic Experiencing, which is what Peter Levine developed, working with war veterans, for instance. So it's really, really tuning into the body and building a sense of safety and well-being, and then beginning to pendulate it, as Marion was just talking about, to touch into it and then move away from it. So that's bottom up. Top down is what we normally think about as psychotherapy, but that within itself, just top down working when you're working with somebody who's traumatized, can be re-traumatizing, because as you begin to tell a story, the brain believes that that story that you're telling in the moment is actually happening to you. It can't distinguish, the brain cannot distinguish between the experience of the past in a story or what is happening in this present moment. So to be very wary of purely top-down kind of working. But when you have somebody who's suffering from developmental trauma, then this becomes way more complex than somebody who's been a war veteran or had an accident or a surgery. And in that case, you need a certain amount of top-down alongside bottom-up working, because you're working with many more factors, building a sense of self, changing negative ideas, reframing the present moment, and so on. So this is where you have top down and bottom up working together, and your healing sandwich. So you're building a relationship, and to build a relationship with somebody, with your therapist or the person you're working with, or who's caring for you, that relationship depends upon building some kind of thinking processes around that, and also developing what's called the medial frontal cortex, expanding that so that you have a capacity for self-reflection, which also happens through top-down work.
It's all very complicated, isn't it? But while you were speaking about that, Rowena's sent a really lovely message and saying, so it's about the future.
Yeah.
And I think it is, isn't it? Because when we talk about the past, as Juliet said, we talk about the past and the traumas, the traumatizing situations from the past. The body believes that it's there now, and so it's going to respond like that. And if you can build a future image of what you do want and how you do want to be, when you begin to talk and engage in that, then the body believes that that's where it is. So the body's got this way of keeping up with the imagination wherever the imagination and the mind are. And so the more we choose to take the mind to the future or the present, if the present is really lovely, like today we're having a really lovely time, we've had a beautiful day, so I don't need to think about a beautiful future because I've got a beautiful present.
Yes.
And so being in this present moment, but then that really does help me to define more clearly what it is that I want to move towards, what kind of a future I do want, and building that up from the positive present experiences. And people who don't believe or perceive to have many positive present experiences, they will need to imagine a positive future, to build that resource, because that's what the resourcing is, isn't it, to me? It's
That's
building
right, yeah.
that pot of abilities for the mind to dip into,
Absolutely,
to bring
yeah.
the experience
Absolutely.
into the whole body.
And the more, if you find that you have a lot of negative thought patterns or a lot of feeling of overwhelm, that is very much a symptom of trauma, that you're very traumatized. And that when we are traumatized, then the world looks very bleak and a very bad place. And Dr. Gabor Mate was pointing this out in this conversation with Russell Brand this morning, when I watched this morning, I think the video was yesterday, about Donald Trump being a man that's very based in a fear-driven reality, and that he perceives the world as a horrible place. That he has to protect himself and there's danger everywhere. And that's because in reality, he was brutalized so much as a little boy that it was indeed his childhood. The world was a very dangerous and awful place to live in. And I think if you can get that piece, that it begins to help us build compassion, because compassion is a really, really important part of our healing. Because if we want to heal if you think about war, it's about, you've got one side attacking another side. Yeah, that one side is turning on another and blaming another, whether really the reasons are financial because of the military industrial complex or whatever. The outcome is that you have a war where you are turning people against each other, and very often you create a scapegoat. So in the Second World War, Hitler, who was a very traumatized person, created the scapegoat of the Jewish people, and then he turned on the gypsies, and many people became marginalized and were attacked. So there's this divisive thing where you're blaming and shaming and attacking someone. So that is what is happening with war. So we need to have compassion for this, and to see beyond now that the perpetrator is actually suffering as much as the victim in this situation. So I had a very interesting, I was reading something recently, and it quoted Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was the woman that wrote books about death and dying, an amazing person. And she herself has died now, but she wrote in one of her books about a visit that she went to one of the concentration camps after the war, and how terribly distressing it was for her when she went there. And she was met at the entrance by this young woman. And then she went in and she looked around and saw all these terrible, terrible things that were a result of what had happened to the people in the concentration camp. Really, really awful things. And then she noticed there were little butterflies carved into the walls. I don't know if any of you have actually read about this. Carved into the walls. People had carved in the dormitories their names and had carved butterflies. And Elizabeth was really amazed by these butterflies that were there. And after she'd looked around, she came back and she started talking to the young woman who'd been at the gate, and said, how come you're here and doing this work of letting people in? And who are you? What do you do? And the young woman said, well, actually, she told this story about how she had come as a young woman, as a child. She'd been brought to the concentration camps, and her family had been pushed into the gas chambers. And she was being pushed in as well, but there were too many people in there and she couldn't be pushed in. So she was yanked back and the door was closed. It's a horrible story. So just taking a breath to ground yourself. So this young woman actually survived and didn't get put in the gas chambers. And she managed to survive the whole episode of the concentration camps, and then everybody was liberated. But what did she do? She went back and she was a doorkeeper to let visitors into the concentration camp. And Elizabeth said, and why are you doing this? And what else are you doing? And she replied, why, I'm a nurse and I'm taking care of the children of the Nazis that suffered as a result of the war. And Elizabeth said, but why are you doing that? After what happened, you lost your whole family to the gas chambers. Why are you doing this? And the young woman replied and said that until I truly heal myself, there are always going to be wars, because a Nazi, I don't know if she said Nazi or fascist or Hitler, one of those things, but indicating Hitler lives within each one of us. And I think, the interpretation is that when we are traumatized, and we can go so easily into fight or flight or parasympathetic shock or disconnected, and we start attacking and blaming and marginalizing other people, even if they are Donald Trump or the perpetrators of some terrible thing, when all we can do is attack and say that they're really, really bad, we are actually stepping into our own violence, which is understandable because we're in fear, and this is our nervous system going into fight or flight. So if we're to truly heal this, then we have to understand that we're actually all in this together. We need to build compassion for our own suffering and compassion for the suffering of other people, even if those other people we perceive as being the perpetrators and on the other side of this fence. Because at the moment, we're all in this together. We have created jointly a planet that is highly traumatized, and we're all suffering. So it comes down to each one of us to heal this Hitler within ourselves, this part of ourselves where we can so easily, and I've done it, I've slapped my children, I've blamed my partner and other relatives, I've been angry, I've smashed things, I've been in despair. And this is the effects of trauma. And people do that and they go further and they kill somebody if they hurt someone. And it's not because they're bad, it's because they're traumatized. And that's very hard, because when people are really suffered as a consequence of this terrible stuff that's gone on, then you can say, well, it's justified that Hitler was a really, really bad person, or Donald Trump was a really bad person. For sure, their actions were really, really bad and caused tremendous harm. But understand the root cause of this, and that if we're going to heal it, we have to move away from violence, and we have to move away from having a Hitler living inside ourselves. And this is why compassion is so important, and non-violence is so important, which is why all the great leaders practice non-violence, because you can't solve a situation by putting the same thing. So as Marion said, with the same thinking, putting that back in. You can't end violence by creating more violence.
No, and it's seen as so weak, isn't it, to be vulnerable or to not be violent. It's seen as such a weakness within our own society that, again, people are frightened of humiliation and frightened of being seen as weak or being labelled as somebody that's bad or blamed. And we want, as mammals that we are, beyond being human, we are mammals, or before we're human, we're mammals. And the nature of mammals is to be in communities, isn't it? It's to be in relationships and communities. And so our nature to relate, our nature to commune with each other is such a powerful nature. And when that is broken, this is where the pain and the terror and the trauma break that nature of communing and create this nature of conflict. So the brilliant work that you're doing is, to me, is about reducing the conflict and increasing the communing.
Yes, we are communing here now.
We are.
I'm so grateful to all of you that have turned up today on this call and what you're sharing.
And so the next bit. Hello, Rachel's just joined us after Sunday lunch.
Yeah,
hello,
Rachel. Hi.
And so the next thing I wanted to talk to you all about quickly is how the training that I'm doing with Julia is absolutely life-changing. It's life-changing. I think half of the people who I know would prefer I hadn't done it, because I used to be a bit of a compliant people pleaser, and I'm not that anymore.
Oh, wow.
I'm a non-compliant people pleaser. I don't know if that's true.
And a happier person.
A much happier. Well, I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't feel happier, but I don't feel anymore that I don't have a choice, and I don't feel that I don't know how to sort out the shit that I'm not happy about. it's absolute. It doesn't always make me feel comfortable, because I know now I can make decisions and I've got choices that take me to ground I've never trodden before. They take me out of my comfort zone, and that's when it starts to feel a bit. I feel a bit discombobulated. But I know that I've got to step out of my comfort zone, because otherwise I'll just
growth. That's growth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like the seed has to break out of its shell. The caterpillar has to, or the chrysalis has to break out of its thing. And so this breaking out of something that you've always known, it's always felt comfortable in the past. But actually it wasn't comfortable, because I would say I was in my comfort zone, but I think if I tune into my body,
you're in a lot of
it wasn't comfortable at all.
In a huge amount of pain.
It wasn't comfortable. My mind thought it was comfortable because it was used to it.
Yeah.
But it was just used to the pain. And so now I'm able to really access choice, a place of choice, and knowing that I'm growing and taking these uncomfortable steps, because the outcome is moving in the direction of what I do want.
That's right.
And I'm not running away from what I don't want anymore. I'm moving towards what I do want. And I have this thing about, I call it obsolescence. So like with a computer system, we don't have Windows 95 anymore. It doesn't really exist. But nobody had to kill it. Nobody had to fight it. Nobody had to shoot it down or go on marches against it. You just build what you want. You build the next version of what it is that you do want, with all of the components and the things that you do want in it. And when you build that, the old becomes obsolete automatically. You don't need to focus on it and force it away. So I no longer bother to run away from what I don't want. I can focus on moving towards what I do want. And that definitely and massively has been impacted by the work that I've done with Juliet. And so as you can see, the next training starts in January. I've put it up across the screen.
Oh, right.
That's what it says.
Yes.
My magic IT skills.
Yes, that's very good. And there are a few places left.
There's a few places left. You should, if you don't sign up today, you're daft. That's all I say. It is absolutely a life-changing course. And so Rachel's talking about its deep work, yes, and it's completely transformational, as I hopefully have just shared as well. Rachel was one of the people. Actually, Rachel was the person who introduced me to Juliet's work, because Rachel and I were Facebook friends, and she talked about Juliet's course all the time. And as soon as I looked her up, I was like, yes, I'm doing it. I got a big yes in my body. Yes, this is definitely what I want to do. And I've never regretted a moment of it.
Yeah.
And then my beautiful business partner, Cheryl, is on as well. And she's talking about the uncomfortable comfort zone, which is when we feel really uncomfortable and really discombobulated, but we know it's because we're moving towards what we do want. And yeah, absolutely, Rachel, it's so very true. Let's focus on what we do want.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say about the training that I'm actually on a really, really big mission, and my mission is to heal the trauma of the planet. And for that, I need to be in connection and community with very many people, and that I need to heal myself. I'm not healed, but I'm in the process of it, and help other people to heal. And I want to help grow a tribe of emissaries that can carry out the trauma healing, and that we can actually touch in on the way that all these different sectors in society are currently. So I'm getting a bit tongue-tied here. Because I'm so emotional about this, is that if we are going to heal the trauma of the planet, we need people who are actually working in these different sectors, in the education sector and the prison systems, in the mental health systems and so on, that we can begin to deliver trauma-informed consultancy and services to people. So this is my aim, this is my mission, is that I'm training people to be able to do this. And this year's training is the first step on this, but there is an advanced training. So for any of my students that were previously following the training with me, that as from next February, the advanced training starts. And this will significantly take you to a position where you can impact and help heal, help me, help us on this planetary mission of ending war and ending trauma. And yeah, what can I say? I get all tongue-tied.
Get all tongue-tied because you're so excited.
I'm so excited.
I've got a message. Become an emissary of, like, my spelling is dreadful. Can I blame that on trauma? I'm a bad speller because I was traumatized at school.
Well, it could.
It's
a lot
possible,
of
isn't
Gabor Mate talks about
Yeah.
ADHD and how much that's a symptom of trauma.
So I'm saying that. Anyway.
Yeah.
I do have a story, but we don't have time for it now. But yeah, it's really important that we learn how to heal ourselves and how to be lights for other people, be the guiding light for other people, to show people that it is possible and that there are really good teachers and supporters out there. But my belief is that we actually only really teach what we haven't yet fully embodied. Because if we'd fully and truly embodied something, we would never need to teach it, because it would automatically flow from us. It would resonate out of us, if you like, and or radiate out of us. And so while I'm teaching, I know that I'm still learning, and I'm still learning how to embody what I'm teaching. And I'm really happy to help others to be on the same path as me and to learn how to become these beacons of light, of healed from trauma light people who share this lovely, loving light of healed trauma that really helps the whole planet. Because as we keep talking about, there's this ripple effect and this spreading and sharing of information that happens at such an unconscious, automatic level. And that, again, is just coming back to that lovely quote about be the change that you want to see in the world, because it's only by being it and by emitting it yourself that you've got any chance of sharing what you want with the world. That's my view.
Yes, that's right. So come along, come and join us. Or I aim to have people get to the place within themselves where they're able to initiate their own trauma healing activities in the workplace where they are, or in the family system they're in, or in the community that they're in. I aim to have people have a depth of skill and compassion that they can really carry this work out. So when I say I want to heal the trauma of the planet, that's a kind of grandiose idea, but I am planting a seed, and I'm planting a seed alongside many other people that are planting the seed. So if you think about populating the world with forests, reforestation of the planet, we need many, many people to be sowing those seeds. So there are many great teachers that I'm learning from, and I'm hoping to help other people become great teachers.
And one last thing I want to say before we go is about the mission of what we have. I'm going to put that back on, become an emissary of light, because we've got a few people on the planet who are doing really great work, who are really visionary in the way that they live their lives and the way that they show who they are to the world. And one of them is Elon Musk. And we're on a bit of a mission at the moment, aren't we? Because we love the work that he does. Juliet is a huge fan, and she's actually turned me on to Elon Musk recently, because we have this common goal, and the goal is to advance the consciousness of humanity.
Yes.
So advancing the consciousness of humanity. Elon, we're on it. We're definitely on it. We'd love to see how we can advance it even more by joining together with great visionaries like you, who are already in really powerful positions. And we know that when you're in a powerful position, you've got a huge vision and a huge mission. You need a team of emissaries to help you to spread that good work out there. And we know that we are the team, definitely, that will be able to advance the consciousness of humanity, because that's absolutely spot on congruent with what it is, with the work that we're doing when it comes to looking at trauma and breaking those old cycles, like the cycle of trauma and war.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Joe Rogan too. Who's that, Yvonne? Yes, Joe. Well, so one of the things that you could do is, when you've watched this video, please list who you perceive as the great visionaries to be, that we know we can commune with and become in the same tribe as, in order to really get the message out there and to make a difference and advance the consciousness of humanity.
Yes, because together we're powerful.
Yes.
And if you take the Bodhisattva vow that we can't have enlightenment, no one's enlightened until we're all enlightened. So where those pools of consciousness are already developed, and we have people like Elon Musk who are really visionary. The more we can amplify that effect by the work that we're doing, the stronger that we become, because I truly believe that this planet can become heaven on earth. We can create that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Should we do a breath before we go?
Should we do a breath?
One more breath. It's a nice big.
Okay, a big thank you to everyone who's turned up before we do the breath. I so want, from my heart to yours, to say a really, really big thank you, to spend this afternoon. It might have been sunny where you are, and thank you for just taking the time to be here with us. So lots of gratitude. And a big breath. Should we do a big breath now?
Feel your bum on the seat.
Feet on the floor.
And then a nice big breath.
And go and do something nice afterwards. Love yourself up for being the special person that you are.
So a nice deep breath in. And blow slowly. Thank you.